The most dangerous man in Seoul wasn't supposed to care about the bruises on his secretary's skin. Men disappeared because of Kang Min-Jae. Politicians changed laws because of him. Business rivals feared hearing his name whispered in private rooms. Yet one glimpse of purple bruises hidden beneath a silk blouse nearly destroyed the control he had spent years building. Because those bruises belonged to Seo-Yeon, the woman who organized his life. The woman who never asked him for anything. The woman he had absolutely no business wanting. And from the moment he saw those marks, someone was going to pay for putting them there. The problem was that Seo-Yeon didn't want revenge. She didn't want rescue. And she definitely didn't want the protection of a man whose hands were stained with blood. But love rarely asks permission. An obsession never does. Before either of them realized it, they were heading toward a collision that would threaten everything they believed about themselves. A collision of fear and desire. Power and vulnerability. Darkness and redemption. And when it was over, neither of them would be the same. If you love dark romance stories filled with obsession, dangerous attraction, and unforgettable twists, make sure to like this video and subscribe. It helps us create more stories for readers who can't resist falling for the villain. Would you ever trust someone everyone else fears? The city of Seoul glittered after sunset. Skyscrapers reflected thousands of lights. Luxury cars moved through crowded streets. Successful people hurried between meetings, restaurants, and penthouse apartments. To outsiders, it looked like a city built on ambition. But every city had shadows. And in Seoul's darkest corners, one name carried more weight than any politician or celebrity. Kang Min-Jae. 38 years old. CEO of Mafia Holdings. Financial genius. Billionaire. Visionary. At least that was the public version. The truth was far more dangerous. His father had built one of Korea's most powerful criminal organizations decades earlier. When his father died unexpectedly, Min-Jae inherited everything. The money. The enemies. The violence. The responsibility. He had never wanted that life. But life rarely cared about what people wanted. Especially people born into darkness. Over the years, Min-Jae transformed the organization. He made it smarter. More disciplined. More powerful. The streets stopped seeing gangsters. Instead, they saw executives. Investors. Lawyers. Businessmen. But underneath the expensive suits, danger remained. And everyone knew it. The board members at Mafia Holdings respected him. His employees admired him. His enemies feared him. Nobody loved him. Nobody got close enough. Because Kang Min-Jae made sure of that. 5 years earlier, he had made the mistake of trusting someone. Just once. A woman named Yuna. Beautiful. Intelligent. Ambitious. For 2 years, she convinced him she loved him. He imagined a future with her. A family. A life outside the darkness. Then he discovered she had been working for a rival organization the entire time. Every kiss had been calculated. Every smile strategic. Every promise a lie. The betrayal nearly destroyed him. After that, he stopped believing in love. Love created weakness. Weakness created vulnerability. Vulnerability got people killed. So he built walls. Higher. Stronger. Permanent. By 38, Kang Min-Jae possessed everything money could buy. Yet every night he returned to an empty penthouse overlooking the Han River. A king ruling a kingdom of loneliness. And nobody noticed. Seo-Yeon woke up every morning at 5:30. Not because she wanted to. Because she needed time. Time to cover bruises. Time to prepare herself. Time to become the version of herself the world expected. At 29 years old, she had mastered survival. Concealer hid discoloration. Long sleeves concealed injuries. A calm smile disguised fear. By the time she arrived at Myrie Holdings each morning, nobody suspected the truth. Nobody knew her husband still stalked her. Nobody knew she checked parking lots before entering buildings. Nobody knew she sometimes slept with lights on. To her co-workers, she was impressive. Reliable. Elegant. Confident. The perfect executive secretary. But appearances lied. 3 years earlier, she had believed she found her soulmate. Lee Hyun-woo. Her college sweetheart. Her first love. The man who promised forever. For a while, he was exactly who she believed him to be. Then his business failed. Debt accumulated. Stress increased. And slowly, the man she loved disappeared. In his place emerged someone cruel. Someone angry. Someone dangerous. The first time he grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks, he cried afterward. The first time he slapped her, he apologized for hours. The first time he shoved her against a wall. She realized love couldn't save someone who didn't want to change. Leaving him should have been simple. Instead, it became another nightmare. Threats. Manipulation. Harassment. Legal games delaying their divorce. 1,000 invisible chains keeping her trapped. Still, she endured. Because surviving was what she did best. Every day she walked into Myrie Holdings and focused on work. Work was safe. Work made sense. Work didn't betray people. And her boss? Her boss was the easiest person in the world to understand. Or so she believed. Cold. Demanding. Emotionless. Predictable. Kang Min-Jae cared about results. Nothing else. At least that's what she thought. When Seo-Yeon first started working for Min-Jae, she hated him. Not openly. Professionally. Quietly. He expected perfection. Accepted no excuses. Rarely smiled. Never shared personal details. Meetings began exactly on time. Schedules followed military precision. Mistakes were remembered. Successes barely acknowledged. For months she viewed him as another rich executive disconnected from ordinary people. Then strange things started happening. An employee's mother required expensive surgery. The company anonymously paid for it. A janitor's son received a university scholarship. No explanation. No publicity. A receptionist struggling with rent suddenly received a promotion. Again, no explanation. Over time, Seo-Yeon began noticing a pattern. Whenever someone desperately needed help, somehow help arrived. Always anonymously. Always quietly. Eventually she discovered the truth. The source was Min-Jae. But he never wanted credit. That confused her. Because cruel men loved recognition. Kind men sought gratitude. Min-Jae seemed interested in neither. It was her first glimpse beneath the armor. And somehow, it made him more dangerous. Not less. Because mysterious men were harder to resist than predictable ones. Even if she refused to admit it. The changes happened slowly. Almost invisibly. One winter evening, Seo-Yeon worked 3 hours past closing. When she finally left the building, a security guard escorted her outside. She frowned. "I didn't request security." The guard looked confused. "Mr. Kang instructed us months ago." Months ago. She hadn't known. The following week, Min-Jae skipped lunch again. A common occurrence. So she quietly left food outside his office. No note. No conversation. Just food. The container disappeared. The next day, a coffee appeared on her desk exactly how she liked it. No explanation. No note. Just coffee. Neither mentioned it. Neither needed to. A silent language was developing between them. Acts instead of words. Care instead of confessions. And perhaps that made it more dangerous. Because emotions ignored became emotions that grew. Rain hammered against the skyscraper windows. Most employees had already gone home. An international delegation would arrive within an hour. Seo-Yeon had exactly 20 minutes to prepare. Then disaster struck. Coffee spilled down the front of her white blouse. She cursed softly. There wasn't enough time to drive home. Fortunately, she kept spare clothing in the executive changing suite. The floor was nearly empty. She hurried inside. Locked the door. Removed the ruined blouse. And reached for the replacement. At that exact moment, the door opened. Her heart stopped. Kang Min-Jae stepped inside. For one frozen second, neither moved. Shock flashed across his face. Seo-Yeon grabbed her shirt. Min-Jae immediately turned away. "I'm sorry." His voice was calm. Controlled. Respectful. But before he turned, he saw them. The bruises. Dark fingerprints on her shoulder. Fading marks across her upper back. Evidence of violence. Evidence of pain. Evidence someone had hurt her. The room fell silent. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Something shifted. Something irreversible. Because Kang Min-Jae knew bruises. He knew exactly what caused them. And for the first time in years, he felt rage. Not business anger. Not strategic anger. Something personal. Something dangerous. Seo-Yeon quickly dressed. Her face burned with humiliation. Fear. Shame. Not because he had seen her changing. But because he had seen the truth. The truth she worked so hard to hide. When she finally looked at him, his expression was unreadable. Yet his eyes seemed darker than usual. Colder. More dangerous. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. A simple question. But something about it nearly broke her. She forced a smile. The same smile she used every day. The same lie. "I'm fine." Min-Jae stared at her. Long enough to know she was lying. Long enough to know she expected him to believe it. Then he stepped aside. Allowing her to leave. Saying nothing more. Doing nothing. At least for now. Because as the elevator doors closed behind Seo-Yeon, Kang Min-Jae pulled out his phone. And called the one man he trusted completely. His head of security. Find out who did that to her. Silence. Then. "Boss?" His voice turned deadly calm. "The man responsible has 24 hours before I learn his name. And somewhere in Seoul. A countdown had just begun. The next morning, Seoul looked exactly the same. Traffic filled the streets. Employees rushed through revolving doors. Meetings began. Phones rang. Coffee brewed. The world continued turning. But for Kang Min-Jae, everything had changed. Because for the first time in years, he couldn't stop thinking about someone. And he hated it. The moment he entered Myri Holdings, he expected his focus to return. It didn't. His eyes immediately searched for her. Seo-Yeon. She was already at her desk. Professional as always. Hair neatly tied back. Dark navy skirt suit. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. Perfect lie. The bruises remained hidden. But now he knew they existed. And once truth was seen, it couldn't be unseen. For several seconds he watched her through the glass wall of his office. She was speaking with another executive. Taking notes. Smiling politely. Nobody noticed how carefully she avoided sudden movements. Nobody noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes. Nobody except him. A strange pressure settled inside his chest. Possessive. Protective. Dangerously unfamiliar. The feeling irritated him. Because it made no sense. He wasn't her lover. Wasn't her family. Wasn't even her friend. He was her employer. Nothing more. Nothing less. Yet every instinct inside him screamed otherwise. By noon, his security team delivered their report. The folder landed on his desk. Thin. Simple. Devastating. Min-Jae opened it. Photographs. Police complaints. Witness statements. Medical records. Divorce filings. Everything Seo-Yeon had tried to hide. The deeper he read, the darker his expression became. Lee Hyun-woo. 32 years old. Failed entrepreneur. Gambling debts. History of violence. History of intimidation. History of stalking. A coward who only felt powerful when hurting someone weaker. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened. The report included photographs from recent weeks. One image showed Hyun-woo waiting outside Seo-Yeon's apartment. Another showed him following her vehicle. A third showed him grabbing her wrist outside a convenience store. The security footage timestamp was only 12 days old. 12 days. Someone had touched her. Threatened her. Terrified her. For 12 days, Min-Jae had been unaware. A dangerous silence filled the office. His head of security watched carefully. Boss? Min-Jae slowly closed the file. What happens if I kill him? The question was asked casually. Too casually. The security chief immediately understood the danger. That would create complications. Min-Jae nodded. That's what I thought. But the fact he had considered it at all disturbed him. Because he wasn't reacting like a rational businessman. He was reacting like a man who wanted blood. And that realization should have frightened him. Instead, it frightened everyone else. For the next 2 weeks, Min-Jae said nothing. He never mentioned the bruises. Never confronted Seo-Yeon. Never exposed what he knew. Instead, he watched. And that was somehow worse. Because every day he learned something new. He learned she skipped lunch whenever deadlines became stressful. He learned she loved old romance novels but hid them inside financial reports. He learned she bought coffee for the cleaning staff every Friday. He learned she always carried pepper spray. That discovery nearly shattered him. Pepper spray. A woman should not need to carry pepper spray just to feel safe. Especially not her. Especially not while working for him. His protectiveness became an obsession before he realized it. Extra security appeared around her apartment. Anonymous. Untraceable. Her parking space moved closer to building entrances. Anonymous. Untraceable. Several threatening debt collectors suddenly stopped contacting her ex-husband. Anonymous. Untraceable. Every problem around Seo-Yeon seemed to disappear. She never knew why. But Min-Jae knew. Because he was eliminating threats before they reached her. And every time he solved another problem, the obsession grew. The problem with obsession was that it disguised itself as concern. At first, Min-Jae genuinely believed he was helping. Then one evening he noticed something. Seo-Yeon was laughing. Not with him. With another man. A young marketing executive. The man wasn't flirting. The conversation wasn't inappropriate. Nothing was happening. Yet irritation surged through Min-Jae instantly. The sight bothered him far more than it should have. His eyes remained fixed on them. The laughter. The smiles. The easy conversation. His expression darkened. Across the room, his longtime advisor noticed immediately. "You're staring." Min-Jae looked away. "No. You absolutely are." "I'm working." The advisor laughed. "You look like you're planning a murder." Min-Jae returned to his paperwork. But the truth lingered. Why had her laughter bothered him? Why had another man's attention felt threatening? Why had he spent 10 minutes imagining all the reasons that executives should be transferred overseas? The answer was dangerous. So he refused to acknowledge it. 3 days later, Seo-Yeon stayed late again. A storm rolled across Seoul. Most employees went home early. Only a handful remained. At nearly midnight, the lights on her floor were still on. Min-Jae noticed immediately. He stepped out of his office. She sat alone. Surrounded by paperwork. Massaging her temple. Exhausted. For a moment, he simply watched. Not as her boss. As a man. A lonely man observing another lonely person. "You should go home." Seo-Yeon jumped slightly. "I didn't hear you." "You should go home." She smiled faintly. "I still have work. Tomorrow. The investors arrive at 8. Tomorrow." The firmness in his voice surprised her. She stared at him. And for the first time, she noticed something unusual. Concern. Real concern. Not professional concern. Personal concern. The realization made her nervous. Because she wasn't prepared for personal. Personal led to attachment. Attachment led to pain. She knew that lesson too well. "I'm fine," she said quietly. The familiar words hung between them. Min-Jae's eyes darkened. The same words she'd used after the bruises. The same lie. His response came softer than expected. "No, you're not." Silence. The air shifted. Something vulnerable surfaced between them. For a brief moment, neither wore masks. Neither hid behind titles. CEO. Secretary. Boss. Employee. None of it mattered. Just two damaged people standing in an empty office. Then the moment passed. Seo-Yeon looked away first. And Min-Jae hated himself for wanting it back. 1 week later, everything escalated. A violent rainstorm flooded portions of the city. Roads closed. Traffic stopped. Employees became stranded. Including Seo-Yeon. By the time she reached the underground parking garage, she realized her car wouldn't start. Perfect. Just perfect. She closed her eyes. Fatigue washed over her. The last thing she needed was another problem. Then a black luxury sedan appeared beside her. The rear window lowered. Kang Min-Jae sat inside. Expression unreadable. Get in. Her heartbeat stumbled. I can call a taxi. No. His answer came immediately. A command. Not a suggestion. She crossed her arms. I'll be fine. There are flood warnings. I'll manage. His jaw tightened. For several seconds they stared at each other. Neither willing to surrender. Neither willing to admit why this mattered. Finally Min-Jae opened the door himself. Rain pounded against the concrete structure. Thunder echoed overhead. And then he spoke words that made her pulse race. Stop pretending you have to survive everything alone. The world seemed to stop. Because nobody had ever said that before. Nobody had ever looked at her as though carrying everything alone wasn't strength. Wasn't independence. Wasn't survival. For one dangerous second, she almost cried. Instead, she entered the car. And the moment she sat beside him, everything changed. The drive lasted 40 minutes. Neither spoke much. Yet the silence felt strangely intimate. Rain slid across tinted windows. Soft music played quietly. The city blurred outside. Inside the vehicle, tension grew. Not fear. Not discomfort. Something far more dangerous. Awareness. Seo-Yeon became painfully conscious of his presence. His scent. His voice. The way his expensive suit fit broad shoulders. The controlled power beneath every movement. For months she had ignored these details. Now she couldn't. And that terrified her. Because attraction wasn't safe. Especially attraction to a man like Kang Min-Jae. A man who seemed carved from secrets. A man powerful enough to ruin lives. A man she should absolutely avoid. Yet somehow, the closer she got to him, the harder that became. When the car finally stopped outside her apartment, relief and disappointment arrived simultaneously. Neither feeling made sense. Neither feeling felt safe. She reached for the door handle. Thank you. His voice stopped her. Seo-Yeon. Her name sounded different coming from him. Softer. More personal. She turned. Their eyes met. For several seconds neither spoke. Neither looked away. The atmosphere became electric. Heavy. Charged. One movement. One word. One mistake. And everything would change. Then his phone rang. The spell shattered instantly. Min-Jae looked away. The moment disappeared. And Seo-Yeon quickly exited the vehicle. But as she entered her apartment building, her pulse remained completely out of control. Because for the first time, she was no longer afraid of Kang Min-Jae. She was afraid of herself. That same night, Min-Jae received a phone call. One of his surveillance teams. His expression darkened immediately. What do you mean he was there? The answer made his blood run cold. Lee Hyun-woo, Seo-Yeon's estranged husband, had been waiting outside her apartment earlier. Watching. Again. The call ended. A dangerous silence followed. Then Min-Jae stood. Slowly. Calmly. Too calmly. Because deep inside, something had changed. This was no longer concern. No longer curiosity. No longer simple attraction. It had become something darker. Something obsessive. Something possessive. The realization should have frightened him. Instead, it felt inevitable. He stared through the penthouse windows overlooking Seoul. His reflection stared back. Cold. Powerful. Dangerous. Then he quietly spoke words nobody else would ever hear. Words that revealed the truth he refused to admit. Touch her again. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. And I'll destroy you. The promise hung in the darkness. And somewhere across the city, the storm was only beginning. Have you ever been attracted to someone you knew was trouble? The most confusing thing about Kang Min-Jae wasn't that he frightened people. It was that Han Seo-Yeon felt safest when he was near. And that terrified her. Because safety was supposed to feel peaceful. Min-Jae felt like a storm. A beautiful, controlled, dangerous storm. The kind that could shelter you from the rain while simultaneously becoming the thing that destroyed you. Over the following weeks, their lives became increasingly intertwined. Not intentionally. Not at first. But fate had a way of creating opportunities for people already moving toward each other. Late-night meetings. Business trips. Emergency negotiations. Unexpected crises. Suddenly they were spending hours together every day. Hours that became conversations. Conversations that became confidences. And confidences that slowly became emotional dependence. The change happened so gradually neither recognized it until it was already too late. One evening, they found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace of Myri Holdings after a difficult investor meeting. The city stretched endlessly beneath them. A sea of lights against the darkness. Seo-Yeon wrapped her arms around herself as cold winds swept across the rooftop. Immediately, a heavy suit jacket settled around her shoulders. She froze. Min-Jae had already turned away, pretending not to notice. You'll get cold. His voice remained casual. But nothing about the gesture felt casual. Seo-Yeon's fingers tightened around the expensive fabric. His warmth lingered there. His scent. His presence. A dangerous intimacy hidden inside a simple act of kindness. Thank you. He nodded. Silence followed. Comfortable silence. The kind that only existed between people who understood each other. Finally, Seo-Yeon spoke. Do you ever get tired? Min-Jae glanced toward her. Tired of what? Pretending. The question surprised him. She continued quietly. You're always in control. He almost laughed. If only she knew. If only she understood how much control he was losing whenever she walked into a room. You think I'm pretending? I think everyone pretends. For a moment, vulnerability flashed across her face. We pretend we're stronger than we are. The statement hit closer than she realized. Because strength had become both their prison and their identity. Neither knew how to survive without it. Neither knew how to ask for help. And perhaps that was why they understood each other so well. 3 nights later, Seo-Yeon's carefully constructed world cracked. It happened unexpectedly. A single phone call. A single voice. A single reminder of everything she was trying to escape. Her estranged husband. Lee Hyun-woo. The call came just after midnight. She answered without thinking. A mistake she regretted immediately. His voice sounded different. Unstable. Angrier than usual. More desperate. You think you're better than me now? Seo-Yeon closed her eyes. Not this again. Not tonight. Please stop calling. Is it because of him? Her stomach tightened. What are you talking about? Your billionaire boyfriend. Fear spread through her chest. How much did he know? How long had he been watching? The conversation deteriorated quickly. Threats. Accusations. Manipulation. The same cycle she had endured for years. But something changed this time. Because she wasn't afraid anymore. Not in the same way. Eventually she hung up. Then blocked the number. Then sat alone in her apartment. Shaking. Not because of Hyun-woo. Because she realized something terrifying. When she'd felt threatened. The first person she'd wanted to call was Kang Min-Jae. Not a friend. Not family. Not the police. Him. That realization shattered every emotional wall she'd built. Because it meant he mattered. Far more than he should. The next morning, Min-Jae immediately noticed something was wrong. Seo-Yeon's smile looked forced. Her eyes looked exhausted. She avoided eye contact. He recognized the signs instantly. Pain. Fear. Heartbreak. Without explanation, he canceled 3 meetings. Then instructed her to accompany him to an external business inspection. Technically work. Unofficially an excuse. An opportunity to get her away from whatever was hurting her. She didn't argue. She was too emotionally drained. The drive took them beyond Seoul's financial district. Past luxury towers. Past crowded streets. Toward the outskirts of the city. Eventually they arrived at a children's shelter. Seo-Yeon stared. Confused. This is the inspection? Min-Jae looked almost uncomfortable. Something like that. Then she understood. The shelter. The donations. The scholarships. The anonymous support. This was one of the places he secretly funded. Children immediately ran toward him. Laughing. Smiling. Excited. And what happened next completely shattered her perception of him. The feared Mafia boss smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a controlled smile. A genuine one. Warm. Human. Real. Children climbed onto his shoulders. Pulled his hands. Demanded attention. And Kang Min-Jae gave it willingly. For nearly 2 hours. Seo-Yeon couldn't stop watching. Because this version of him felt impossible. The ruthless king of Seoul's underworld shouldn't exist alongside this man. Yet somehow both were true. And that contradiction made him impossible to resist. The drive back to Seoul happened after sunset. The city lights shimmered ahead. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally Seo-Yeon broke the silence. You never tell people about the shelter. No. Why? He stared through the windshield. Good deeds stop being good deeds when they're advertisements. The answer stunned her. Then he surprised her again. My mother volunteered at shelters. Seo-Yeon turned toward him. This was new. Personal. Rare. Your mother. For a moment, grief softened his expression. She believed everyone deserved kindness. His voice lowered. Even people who didn't deserve it. The statement carried decades of pain. Seo-Yeon recognized it instantly. The grief of losing someone who had mattered deeply. Without thinking, she touched his hand. The movement lasted less than a second. Yet both froze. Electricity shot through the car. Neither moved away immediately. Neither spoke. The moment stretched. Dangerous. Intimate. Then reality returned. Seo-Yeon withdrew first. But neither forgot. And neither slept much that night. While their feelings deepened, danger grew closer. Because powerful men always attracted powerful enemies. And Kang Min-Jae had many. One enemy in particular had been watching carefully. Park Jin-tae. Leader of a rival criminal organization. A man who hated Min-Jae with obsessive intensity. For years, Jin-tae searched for weaknesses. Found none. No family. No lover. No close friends. Nothing. Then his investigators delivered photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Min-Jae and Seo-Yeon. Business meetings. Private conversations. Shared rides. Lingering looks. Protective gestures. Patterns. Evidence. Possibility. Jin-tae smiled. Finally. A weakness. Or at least something close to one. And dangerous men rarely ignored opportunities. A week later, Myri Holdings hosted a luxury corporate gala. Hundreds of executives attended. Media photographers crowded entrances. Champagne flowed freely. The atmosphere sparkled with wealth and influence. Seo-Yeon wore a black evening dress. Elegant. Sophisticated. Beautiful. The moment she entered the ballroom, conversations briefly stopped. Not because she wanted attention. Because she naturally commanded it. And unfortunately, other men noticed. Min-Jae noticed them noticing. The result was immediate. And irrational. Throughout the evening, he watched. Every smile directed at her. Every conversation. Every lingering glance. His mood darkened steadily. One executive became particularly interested. Too interested. The man spent 15 minutes speaking with Seo-Yeon. Laughing. Clearly flirting. Seo-Yeon remained polite. Professional. Unaware of the storm brewing across the room. Finally, Min-Jae had enough. He crossed the ballroom. Interrupted the conversation. And placed a possessive hand against the small of her back. The gesture stunned everyone. Including him. The executive immediately stepped away. Understanding the message. Seo-Yeon looked up. Their eyes met. For one dangerous moment, nobody spoke. Then she quietly said, "Was that necessary?" His answer came instantly. Yes. Her pulse quickened. The possessiveness should have angered her. Instead, it affected her far more than she wanted to admit. Because beneath the control, beneath the jealousy, she recognized something else. Fear. Min-Jae was terrified of losing something he didn't yet possess. And somehow that realization felt heartbreakingly human. Later that evening, they escaped the ballroom together. Fresh air. Silence. Distance from curious eyes. They stood alone on a balcony overlooking Seoul. The city glittered beneath them. Beautiful. Endless. Dangerous. Much like whatever existed between them. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally Min-Jae turned toward her. His expression unreadable. Yet his eyes betrayed everything. Desire. Fear. Longing. Possession. Vulnerability. All hidden beneath years of discipline. Seo-Yeon. The way he said her name nearly stole her breath. Yes. Several seconds passed. Then more. He seemed to be fighting himself. Fighting words. Fighting emotions. Fighting truths. Finally he asked. Why do you stay? She blinked. What? You could work anywhere. His voice lowered. You could leave. The question wasn't professional. It wasn't about employment. It was about him. About them. And they both knew it. Seo-Yeon's heart pounded. Because she understood exactly what he wasn't saying. Why do you stay near me? Why haven't you run? Why are you still here? Her answer came softly. Almost a whisper. Maybe because you're not who people think you are. Something shifted in his expression. Hope. Dangerous hope. For one impossible moment, it seemed as though he might finally tell her everything. His feelings. His fears. His truth. Then his phone rang. And everything changed. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet when it ended, Min-Jae's expression had transformed completely. Cold. Dangerous. Ruthless. The man from the ballroom disappeared. The king returned. Seo-Yeon watched him carefully. A strange unease settling inside her chest. What's wrong? For several seconds he didn't answer. Then. Nothing. A lie. A terrible lie. Because at that exact moment, one of his warehouses had been attacked. 3 men were dead. A message had been left behind. And the criminal war he'd spent years avoiding was beginning. More importantly, Seo-Yeon had unknowingly stepped directly into its path. Neither of them realized it yet. But their forbidden connection was about to become far more dangerous. Because some secrets don't stay buried forever. And soon, Han Seo-Yeon would discover exactly who Kang Min-Jae really was. Can obsession ever become genuine love? Some truths arrive like whispers. Others arrive like explosions. Han Seo-Yeon's truth arrived at 2:17 in the morning. And by 2:18, everything she believed about Kang Min-Jae was shattered. It began with a phone call. A simple phone call she was never supposed to receive. One of Min-Jae's private phones had accidentally been left inside the conference room after an emergency board meeting. Normally, she would have simply returned it. Nothing more. Nothing less. But as she entered the empty room, the device suddenly rang. The screen lit up. One name appeared. Jin-tae. No title. No company. No context. Just a name. The call continued ringing. Then a message arrived. And before she could stop herself, her eyes landed on the preview. 3 dead tonight. Your men failed. The next shipment belongs to me. Seo-Yeon's blood turned cold. Shipment? Men? Failed? What kind of conversation was this? Her pulse accelerated. A terrible feeling settled inside her stomach. One she couldn't explain. One she didn't want to explain. When Min-Jae entered moments later, he immediately noticed her expression. And for the first time since meeting him, she looked afraid of him. Not attracted. Not curious. Afraid. His heart sank instantly. Because somehow, she knew. The silence between them felt unbearable. "What is this?" she asked quietly. Her voice shook. The phone remained in her hand. Min-Jae stared at it. Then at her. Then back at the phone. And for the first time in years, the powerful Kang Min-Jae had no idea what to say. Because there was no lie good enough. No explanation safe enough. No version of the truth that wouldn't hurt her. "What did you read?" The question alone gave her the answer. Her breathing became uneven. "Tell me I'm wrong." Silence. "Tell me." Still silence. The room suddenly felt smaller. Colder. More dangerous. Then Min-Jae finally spoke. And every word destroyed another piece of her trust. "I'm not the man you think I am." The sentence landed like a knife. Seo-Yeon laughed. A broken laugh. The kind people make when reality becomes too painful. "No." She slowly shook her head. "No, that's not true." His expression darkened. "Seo-Yeon. Don't." Tears filled her eyes. Not because he was dangerous. Not because he was powerful. Because he had hidden it. Because she had trusted him. Because she had started falling in love with him. And now she didn't know who he really was. Everything was a lie. It wasn't. "How would I know?" Her voice cracked. The pain inside those 4 words nearly destroyed him. Because he had no answer. No good answer. Not one she would believe. Not after this. For the first time in years, Kang Min-Jae experienced something worse than betrayal. He experienced becoming the betrayer. And it was devastating. Seo-Yeon left. Immediately. No dramatic confrontation. No screaming. No scene. Just silence. The most painful kind. Because silence meant disappointment. And disappointment cut deeper than anger. For 3 days she didn't answer calls. Didn't respond to messages. Didn't come to work. Min-Jae respected her space. For approximately 12 hours. Then he began unraveling. The man who controlled an empire couldn't focus on meetings. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't think. Every room felt empty. Every conversation meaningless. Every success hollow. Because the one person whose opinion mattered now looked at him with fear. And he couldn't blame her. Meanwhile, Seo-Yeon fought her own battle. Part of her felt foolish. Humiliated. Naive. How had she missed it? The signs seemed obvious now. The security. The influence. The fear people carried around him. The unexplained power. The dangerous calm. Everything made sense. Too much sense. Yet another part of her remembered the shelter. The scholarships. The kindness. The late-night conversations. The concern in his eyes. The way he'd always protected her dignity. 2 versions of Kang Min-Jae existed. And she couldn't reconcile them. Which one was real? The ruthless criminal? Or the man who quietly cared for strangers? The question haunted her. Because deep down, she already knew the answer. Both. And somehow that made everything worse. While their relationship collapsed, their enemies moved. Park Jin-tae had been waiting patiently. Waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for weakness. Waiting for distraction. Now he had both. 3 nights after Seo-Yeon disappeared from work, she finally left her apartment. A mistake she would soon regret. She wanted air. Distance. Clarity. Instead, she walked directly into a trap. A van stopped beside her. The side door opened. Everything happened fast. Too fast. Hands. Voices. Panic. Darkness. Then nothing. When Min-Jae received the call, he was in the middle of a board meeting. His head of security rarely interrupted him. Never during meetings. Which meant something was wrong. Very wrong. One look at the man's face confirmed it. Min-Jae stood immediately. The room fell silent. What happened? The answer changed everything. She's gone. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. Then the temperature inside the room seemed to drop. Because every person present witnessed something they had never seen before. Fear. Not on their own faces. On Kang Min-Jae's. The next 48 hours became legendary within Seoul's criminal underworld. Because Kang Min-Jae stopped acting like a businessman. Stopped acting like a strategist. Stopped acting like a king. He became a man desperately searching for the woman he loved. Every resource was mobilized. Every contact activated. Every favor collected. Every enemy questioned. Every possibility investigated. Money became irrelevant. Rules became irrelevant. Nothing mattered except finding Seo-Yeon. His advisors warned him repeatedly. This could be a trap. I don't care. You are exposing yourself. I don't care. They want you emotional. I don't care. And for once, he truly didn't. Because Seo-Yeon mattered more than strategy. More than reputation. More than power. The realization terrified everyone around him. Because a man with nothing to lose was dangerous. A man with someone to lose was unstoppable. For 2 days, Seo-Yeon remained captive. Not tortured. Not harmed. Just held. Waiting. A bargaining chip. A weakness. A message. And during those endless hours, she discovered something unexpected. She wasn't thinking about escape. Not constantly. She wasn't thinking about fear. Not constantly. She was thinking about Min-Jae. Remembering conversations. Remembering moments. Remembering how safe she'd felt with him. And for the first time, she confronted the truth she'd been avoiding. She loved him. Not despite his darkness. Not because of it. But because she had seen the man beneath it. The man nobody else saw. The realization arrived too late. Or so she feared. The warehouse sat abandoned near the docks. Rain hammered the roof. Thunder shook the night. Inside, Park Jin-tae waited confidently. He believed he held all the cards. He was wrong. Because he forgot one critical fact. Love makes people irrational. And irrational people are impossible to predict. Min-Jae didn't wait for negotiations. Didn't wait for approval. Didn't wait for backup. He went himself. Against every recommendation. Against every plan. Against every rule. The confrontation that followed became whispered legend. Not because of the violence. Because of the message. The feared mafia boss risked everything for one woman. By the time security teams finally reached the warehouse, the battle was already over. And Min-Jae was standing beside Seo-Yeon. Bleeding. Exhausted. Alive. The moment she saw him, relief overwhelmed her. Then she noticed the blood. Her fear returned instantly. "You're hurt." His first response wasn't about himself. It was about her. "Are you okay?" Tears filled her eyes. Because even now, even after everything, his first concern remained her. The hospital room remained quiet. Peaceful. For the first time in days. Min-Jae sat beside her bed. Looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. No expensive suit. No authority. No power. Just a tired man carrying too many scars. Finally, he spoke. "I never wanted you involved." She listened. Silent. "I wanted to tell you." His voice lowered. "But every day I waited became another day too late." The honesty hurt because she believed it. Every word. Every regret. Every fear. Then something unexpected happened. Min-Jae revealed everything. The betrayal that destroyed him. The loneliness. The responsibility he never wanted. The burden of inheriting violence. The guilt. The shame. The exhaustion. For the first time, he stopped hiding. And for the first time, Seo-Yeon truly saw him. Not the criminal. Not the billionaire. Not the legend. Just a wounded man. And suddenly forgiveness didn't seem impossible. Weeks passed. Recovery began. Slowly. Painfully. But something had changed. Min-Jae stopped trying to protect his empire. Instead, he began dismantling parts of it. Restructuring operations. Cutting criminal ties. Removing dangerous influences. His advisors were horrified. His enemies celebrated. His allies questioned his sanity. But he continued anyway. Because for the first time in his life, he wanted a future. A real one. And that future included Seo-Yeon. Not as a possession. Not as an obsession. As a partner. Someone free to choose him. Or walk away. The difference mattered. Because genuine love required freedom. And he was finally learning the distinction. One evening, months later, Seo-Yeon discovered something that completely broke her remaining defenses. A lawyer arrived with documents. Legal documents. Her divorce had finally been approved. Every obstacle removed. Every delay resolved. Every intimidation tactic defeated. She stared at the paperwork. Then at the lawyer. How? The answer came quietly. "Mr. Kang never wanted you to know." Her chest tightened. "What?" The lawyer smiled softly. "He started working on this months ago." Months. Before they became close. Before she trusted him. Before he had any reason to expect her love. He had simply wanted her free. Nothing in return. No conditions. No expectations. Just freedom. And in that moment, Seo-Yeon finally understood the truth. This wasn't obsession anymore. This was love. Messy. Complicated. Imperfect. But real. What is the one betrayal you could never forgive? For most of his life, Kang Min-Jae believed love was a weakness. A vulnerability. A liability. Something powerful men couldn't afford. The lesson had been taught to him repeatedly. By betrayal. By violence. By loss. Every person he had ever trusted either left, lied, or died. So he built an empire where fear replaced trust. Control replaced vulnerability. Power replaced connection. And for a while, it worked. He became untouchable. Unbreakable. Unstoppable. Until Seo-Yeon. Until a woman carrying invisible bruises walked into his life and quietly dismantled every defense he possessed. Not with manipulation. Not with seduction. Not with promises. With kindness. With resilience. With honesty. And somehow those things proved stronger than everything he had spent years building. Now, months after the warehouse incident, Min-Jae stood alone inside his penthouse overlooking Seoul. The city sparkled beneath him. Beautiful. Cold. Distant. The same view he'd admired for years. Yet tonight it felt different. Because for the first time, he was seriously considering walking away. Walking away from power. Walking away from fear. Walking away from the life that had defined him. The decision terrified him. Not because he feared losing money. Not because he feared losing influence. Because he feared losing identity. Who was Kang Min-Jae without the empire? Without the title? Without the reputation? The answer remained uncertain. But one thing wasn't. He wanted a future with Seo-Yeon. And for that future to exist, something had to change. Across the city, Seo-Yeon sat beside the Han River, watching the water move beneath the evening lights. Thinking. Healing. Remembering. The bruises on her body had faded long ago. The bruises inside her heart were taking longer. Trauma rarely disappeared overnight. Fear didn't vanish because someone loved you. Trust didn't magically return because someone deserved it. Healing required time. Patience. Courage. And perhaps most difficult of all, choice. For years, Seo-Yeon had survived. Now she needed to learn how to live. There was a difference. Survival meant expecting pain. Living meant risking happiness. And happiness always required vulnerability. The realization frightened her. Because loving Kang Min-Jae meant uncertainty. His world remained dangerous. Complicated. Unpredictable. Yet despite every reason to walk away, her heart kept leading her back toward him. Not because she needed him. That distinction mattered. She no longer needed rescuing. No longer needed protection. No longer needed saving. She wanted him. And that was entirely different. Just when peace seemed possible, one final obstacle emerged. Not from enemies. Not from rivals. From within Min-Jae's own organization. Several senior figures opposed the changes he was making. They believed he was becoming weak. Distracted. Compromised. In their eyes, Seo-Yeon represented a threat. A vulnerability. A dangerous influence. And powerful men rarely surrendered power willingly. The confrontation occurred during a private meeting. One of the older executives spoke bluntly. "You are risking everything." Min-Jae remained calm. "No." The man leaned forward. "You are changing because of her." Silence filled the room. Every person present understood exactly who her meant. Min-Jae's expression never changed. Yes. The admission stunned everyone. The executive laughed bitterly. Then you are no longer fit to lead. For several seconds nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Min-Jae stood. Slowly. Calmly. Decisively. And made a choice that shocked the entire room. I agree. The silence became absolute. Because nobody expected that answer. Nobody expected surrender. Nobody expected acceptance. Yet there it was. Real. Final. Unavoidable. For the first time in his life, Kang Min-Jae chose love over power. Not because love demanded it. Because he wanted it. The distinction changed everything. The following weeks became the most difficult of his life. Transition plans. Corporate restructuring. Negotiations. Internal conflicts. Endless challenges. Walking away from an empire proved harder than building one. Enemies sensed opportunity. Former allies questioned him. Business media speculated endlessly. But Min-Jae remained committed. Because every difficult step moved him closer to something priceless. Freedom. Not freedom from responsibility. Freedom from the darkness he had inherited. Freedom to choose who he wanted to become. And perhaps that was the greatest redemption of all. Not changing the past. Creating a different future. The night he finally saw Seo-Yeon again felt strangely ordinary. No gunfire. No kidnappings. No dramatic rescue. Just two people meeting beside the Han River. The place where countless stories began. And ended. Autumn wind moved gently across the water. City lights reflected against the surface. For several moments neither spoke. They simply stood together. Comfortable. Familiar. Present. Eventually Seo-Yeon broke the silence. I heard about the company. Min-Jae smiled faintly. News travels fast. You really did it? Yes. Why? The answer came immediately. Because he had spent months preparing it. Months understanding it. Months becoming brave enough to say it. Because I was tired of surviving. The words hit her deeply. Perhaps because she understood them so well. For years, both of them had merely survived. Different battles. Different scars. Same loneliness. Same fear. Same isolation. Now they stood at a crossroads. And neither wanted to return to who they used to be. For a long moment, Seo-Yeon stared at him. Studying his face. His eyes. His expression. Searching for uncertainty. Finding none. Then she asked the question she had been carrying for months. What if I can't trust perfectly? The vulnerability in her voice nearly broke him. Because it was honest. Painfully honest. The question wasn't really about trust. It was about fear. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of making another mistake. Fear of giving her heart away. Min-Jae stepped closer. Not enough to pressure her. Just enough to be near. Then he answered. I don't need perfect. His voice remained soft. I just need honest. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Because those words contained everything. No demands. No control. No expectations. No impossible standards. Just honesty. Just effort. Just two imperfect people trying. And suddenly, the last wall inside her heart collapsed. Seo-Yeon laughed through tears. A beautiful, emotional sound. Then shook her head. You make this very difficult. A rare smile appeared. I've been told that before. She stepped closer. Now only inches separated them. The distance felt enormous. And insignificant. At the same time. Finally, she spoke the words she had been carrying for far too long. I love you. The world seemed to stop. Not because of the confession. Because of what it represented. Choice. Trust. Courage. Healing. Everything they had fought for. Everything they nearly lost. Everything they finally found. Min-Jae closed his eyes briefly. Overwhelmed. For years he believed those words weren't meant for him. That love belonged to other people. Better people. Safer people. Not men like him. Yet here she was. Choosing him anyway. When he opened his eyes again, emotion filled them. Raw. Unfiltered. Real. I love you too. No grand speech followed. No dramatic declaration. Just truth. Simple and powerful. Exactly what they needed. Then he kissed her. Slowly. Tenderly. Not as a conqueror. Not as a king. Not as a mafia boss. As a man finally allowing himself to be loved. And as the lights of Seoul reflected across the river beside them. Years of loneliness quietly came to an end. 2 years later. The penthouse no longer felt empty. Morning sunlight filled the kitchen. Soft music played in the background. Laughter echoed through rooms once consumed by silence. Seo-Yeon stood by the window holding a cup of coffee. A wedding ring sparkled on her finger. Behind her, Min-Jae wrapped his arms around her waist. The gesture felt natural now. Comfortable. Home. The scars hadn't disappeared. Neither person's past had been erased. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving forward anyway. Together. Stronger. Wiser. More honest. The empire that once defined Min-Jae no longer controlled his future. And the fear that once controlled Seo-Yeon no longer controlled hers. They had built something better. Something healthier. Something real. A life. A partnership. A love earned through struggle rather than fantasy. And perhaps that made it even more beautiful. Because the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about wounded people finding the courage to trust again. Love requires trust. Trust requires courage. Redemption requires sacrifice. And darkness does not define destiny. No matter how broken the past may seem, people can choose a different future. People can heal. People can change. People can love. Kang Min-Jae and Han Seo-Yeon learned that second chances aren't gifts. They're choices. Choices made every day. To trust. To forgive. To hope. To stay. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do isn't fighting enemies. It's opening their heart after it's been broken. If this dark romance kept you hooked until the end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. New stories filled with obsession, betrayal, redemption, and unforgettable love are waiting for you. And tell us in the comments. Would you have trusted Kang Min-Jae after discovering his secret?